Another consideration for the shoulder. So you got a client that you want to do squats with. I want you to think about this position. So we've already had some discussion, right? That when you take the arm back here, you've lost your anterior stabilizer. There's something else. In order to get your arms back here, you've also got to have enough thoracic mobility, because if you don't have the thoracic mobility, you're going to get it out of the lumbar spine. And each time you change the natural curvature of the lumbar spine, you increase the compressive forces on the spine quite dramatically. Say for every 2 degrees of increased lordosis, the compression on the discs can go up as high as 16%. So you'll be very careful about that, right? So you should do a screen. If a client wants to do, or an athlete wants to do an Olympic squat, have them simply take their arms, put them into this position that would mimic where the bar is, and watch what happens to their trunk. If you're seeing a little bit of the chest barreling forward and the hips driving, low back arching, they should not be allowed to do a squat until you've worked on lumbar stability and thoracic mobility. So when we think of things, all right, we talk about this position is potentially dangerous because you don't have an anterior stabilizer. It also puts potentially more and more stress on the low back. But there's another thing too. If you were to relax your arm, your bicep, and you kind of just palpate, you'll find a point where there's like a little groove, and that's kind of where the long head of the bicep's running through. It's called a bicipital groove. Well, right adjacent to that is a ligament called the transverse humeral ligament. Think of it as a band-aid kind of running over that groove, and what it's doing is keeping that tendon set tightly in that groove so it doesn't snap itself out. Now, as I take my arms and drive them back, so think of pec flies, think of the chest stretch on the wall, on the door jamb, think of the things I do in the gym, all right? When I start going past the midline of my body, so this 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock position, I go to this position. First of all, a lot of this movement is not coming out of the chest. It's simply the chest moving forward. It's just the spine moving, which means the pec is not doing any much more work. You're just moving the spine, all right? I'm talking about movements where the person just drives the arm back like this with no chest movement. Think of you really stretching that band-aid. That band-aid's getting stretched really tight and it's really pushing. So there's really no merit in going too far deep. So when you do your pec flies, whether they're standing on a bench, you're doing your door jam stretch, you don't need to go to these types of positions, because most of that, first of all, incorporates a lot of risk on the shoulder, because you don't have that stabilizer. You're also putting a lot of pressure on that transverse humeral ligament, but also a lot of that movement is not coming through the pec, it's coming through just the chest driving forward. All right, so we're getting thoracic extension rather than actually elongation of the pecs.